realize that all matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration. That we are all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively.
The VIRGO Consortium is an international group of scientists carrying out supercomputer simulations of the formation of galaxies, galaxy clusters, the large-scale structure of the universe, and of the evolution of the intergalactic medium. This is an image showcasing the latest simulation of the known universe, the observable universe. The bright yellow represents large clusters of galaxies surrounded by billions of stars, while the purple web represents the dark matter and dark energy. For those who take neuroscience, you will instantly recognize that the universe looks shockingly similar to the neurological structure of the brain. Despite the implications of this, many scientists retain the mechanistic model of the universe, which renders life as an accidental process of coincidences. But, as this video will attempt to show, there are no coincidences, only the illusion of coincidences.
It's a subject of randomness versus determinism in the universe. Who's jumping in? Jessica.
Determinism says that occurrences in nature are causally decided by preceding events or natural laws, that everything leading up to this point has happened for a reason.
That's right. That's what determinism says. I want you to think about the perfect set of circumstances that put this celestial ball of fire at just the correct distance from our little blue planet for life to evolve. But that's a nice thought, right? Everything has a purpose. An order to it is determined. But then there's the other side of the argument. The theory of randomness, which says it's all simply coincidence. The very fact we exist is nothing but the result of a complex, yet inevitable string of chemical accidents and biological mutations. There is no grand meaning. There's no purpose.
Part 1. The Mechanistic Universe. The current model of the universe is as follows. The universe as we know it is the result of accidents and coincidences, gradually accumulating over the course of 13.4 billion years, up until the very present. This mechanistic universe gradually developed the forces of nature that we know about now, which molded the material left over from the Big Bang into stars and planets, which then go on to contribute to the electromagnetic fields, gravitational fields, and so on. In this mechanistic model, the development of life as we know it was the result of accidents and coincidence. Its origins, a mathematical certainty, the result of a molecular soup of subatomic particles that must form from a statistical outcome of a random universe. Consciousness is an epiphenomena of the brain, an accident, or more accurately put, an illusion of recurring electrochemical signals within the neural network of the brain. This is the current doctrine of our societies. Let's take a step back and observe life from a different perspective. Part 2. The universe experiencing itself.
What is the most astounding fact you can share with us about the universe?
The most astounding fact.
The most astounding fact.
Is the knowledge that the atoms that comprise life on Earth, the atoms that make up the human body, are traceable to the crucibles that cooked light elements into heavy elements in their core under extreme temperatures and pressures. These stars, the high-mass ones among them, went unstable in their later years. They collapsed and then exploded, scattering their enriched guts across the galaxy. Guts made of carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and all the fundamental ingredients of life itself. These ingredients become part of gas clouds that condense, collapse, form the next generation of solar systems, stars with orbiting planets. And those planets now have the ingredients for life itself. So that when I look up at the night sky, and I know that, yes, we are part of this universe, we are in this universe, but perhaps more important than both of those facts is that the universe is in us. When I reflect on that fact, I look up. Many people feel small because they're small and the universe is big, but I feel big because my atoms came from those stars.
Everything that makes up this planet, and all life on it, is made out of subatomic particles, which are held together by the forces of the universe. If we were to follow the journey of any one of those particles, we will find that they trace back to a supernova. At the end of a star's life, it explodes into a supernova, an explosion so massive that it covers a distance spanning several light years across, spreading its enriched contents throughout space. The forces of the universe then mold these particles into new stars and planets, almost like a self-organizing field. In fact, I believe it is a self-organizing field that is intimately associated with all the current known forces of the universe. The weak and strong forces, electromagnetic fields, and gravity. These same particles that now make up the body of a planet, in our case the Earth, now go through natural chemical processes that take hundreds of millions of years, which lead to the formation of the foundations for all life, DNA. And from there, DNA leads to all the millions of different species of organisms that we see today, including us, of course. This is known in biology as the genetic family tree. Now, in order to make sense of the concept presented, one must view the world from all fields of science. It is required that you view this from all perspectives because in reality, life itself is not compartmentalized. It is all interconnected. In other words, one should not simply view life through the eyes of one perspective. One must consider all 360 degrees of perspective. The process of development that I just outlined, the supernova leading to the formation of DNA, traces back to the singularity before the Big Bang. Each star is an offspring of a previous star, and according to known physics, everything in the universe was once one as the singularity. We are the universe experiencing itself subjectively through every manifestation. The manifestations, ranging from life as we know it to crystals and rock formations, abide to the natural forces that molded the shape and form of the subatomic particles consisting all that we see. And now there are theories suggesting self-organizing fields that govern the formation of all things. Part 3. Redefining consciousness and life. The definition of conscious life relies solely on the cultural values of a society. What I mean is that, depending on the belief systems of a society, the people will have a different definition of what they think life is and what consciousness is. The Hopi, for instance, see the earth as the mother of all life, and that all things are made of spirit. In other words, they view all existence as a living, conscious being. Our societies views all these things as resources for us to use, and that consciousness is an epiphenomena of the brain, meaning consciousness is an accident and that we are all essentially machines. All animals and plants are simply machines from this perspective, as well as cells and the subatomic particles that make up everything. The universe is seen as a machine, and all properties of the universe are described in mechanistic terms. So you see, our perception of reality will determine what, in our minds, is true or false. This is important to understand in order to get a sense of what I'm about to say. It would be foolish for someone to say that the experience of a human being is irrelevant, because we are made up of chemical elements reacting within each cell of the body. Yet this is the argument used to deny the concept of the planet being conscious. The planet could not possibly be a conscious entity simply because A, it doesn't have a brain, and B, it's made up of elements. Would it be logical for me to say that you are not a self-conscious entity because the matter that makes up your body is non-living? The argument will then lead to, well, consciousness is just an illusion of the brain, which leads to my next point in the form of a question. Part 4. What is consciousness? This topic is a whole video on its own. It is one of the deepest mysteries of science. Just what exactly is consciousness? The I. After studying the brain for so long, many would say that consciousness is generated by the brain itself. This assumption is taken for granted as common sense. However, closer examination reveals the possibility of an equally valid reality. To understand what I mean, let's recap the neuroscience and psychology that has been revealed about the brain and its role in our consciousness. Number 1, memory. From what we understand about memory so far, it is not held in any single part of the brain. Memory as we know it is the compilation of neurons wired to the senses, meaning that when we recall something, we are stimulating the senses related to the incident, the sounds, the smells, the visuals, the feeling, and the taste. In fact, the visual input is the weakest in this regard. The scent of something will trigger all the neurons associated with the scent, giving us the sensation of reliving the event. This, of course, works in conjunction with the rest of sensory input, which all works in conjunction with the biochemical reactions taking place within cells. So again, I want to emphasize, memory is not stored in the brain as we assume it to be. It is a compilation of the actions and reactions of biochemical stimuli within the brain.
Memories, the idea they're stored in the brain, people have tried to find memories in the brain for more than 100 years. They've failed again and again. And that's because I don't think they're there. I don't think they're there any more than when you listen to a radio program. What you're hearing is coming into it by a form of resonance, in this case electromagnetic resonance. It's not being stored in it.
But I have demonstrated in several of my books that the universe is inside our heads. Our head is outside the universe. This whole studio, for instance, it's got to be inside my head or I wouldn't be aware of it. I've got a model of it inside my head. Now, inside that model of the studio is a model of me. And on top of the model of me is a model of my head. But that's not my real head. My real head contains the studio and my body and this model of a head. And it's the same with the whole universe. The whole universe is a model contained in my head, which contains a model of my head. So I've got two heads, the head outside the universe and the head inside the universe. Now that should be perfectly clear, but if it isn't, Bertrand Russell has a proof using six-dimensional geometry in his book, The Nature of Human Knowledge. I hope that clarifies which is inside and which is outside, and we don't have to get trapped in that again.
Number 2, identity. Now that we've touched upon an aspect of the hardware function of the brain, we will investigate an aspect of its software, the sense of identity. The brain utilizes functions laid out previously, epigenetic of both environmental stimulus and inheritance of genes, to construct a sense of self and the sense of community within its environment. Simply put, your personality and identity are the culmination of all universal or inherited influences, human nature being the base of human psychology, followed by cultural influences in the specified society. Your personality is the end result of these influences, shaped through every interaction and reaction in life. Some parts of your personality are inherited by the immediate culture presented, while other parts of your personality are developed and learned from the society of which the person is placed. So the idea of a self is an illusion, and therefore there is no self, according to not only material reductionists, but to spiritual traditions as well. Number 3, generator or consciousness. And alas, with the last 2 points in mind, the brain is clearly the generator of consciousness, and that we are nothing more than the accidental process of machine-like functions within cells, which are, in and of themselves, the accidental processes of the mechanistic properties of the universe. At least, that's what the material reductionists say. The material reductionists who make up the entire paradigm that is the general consensus of the scientific community. Under this paradigm, the brain generates the illusion of consciousness, and when it dies, the consciousness ceases to be. Yet, despite this, the same evidence used to support this paradigm can be used to support an entirely different paradigm, that the brain is a transceiver of consciousness, rather than the generator. In other words, the same biochemical and neurological functions can be attributed to a machine designed to receive the signal that is consciousness and transmit it through the brain, projecting it into this personality that we identify as ourselves.
Many honest scientists should admit that consciousness is the greatest mystery of science, and that we don't know exactly how it works. The brain's involved in it in some way, but we're not sure how. Could be that the brain generates consciousness the way a generator makes electricity, if you hold to that paradigm, then of course you can't believe in life after death. When the generator is broken, consciousness is gone. But it's equally possible that the relationship, and nothing in neuroscience rules it out, that the relationship is more like the relationship of the TV signal to the TV set. And in that case, when the TV set is broken, of course the TV signal continues.
From this perspective, the brain receives consciousness and filters it through the hardware and software programming of the brain, projecting a sense of identity and self, a sense of I. The consciousness itself is something else altogether. It is a fundamental aspect of the universe. Part 5. Simulation or consciousness.
The only realities we know are the ones our brain manufactures. Our brain receives millions of signals every minute, and we organize them into holograms which we project outside ourselves and call reality. Out of millions and millions of blobs of energy and light, photons and electrons, they make up this imaginary three-dimensional solid world, which doesn't exist at all according to relativity or quantum mechanics.
As more revelations are made through quantum mechanics, more theories of the universe are also made. The fact that there is a fractal-like structure to the universe implies some kind of simulation for some, a kind of computer program. This universe is governed by natural forces which follow mathematical sequences, as expressed in self-organizing structures, ranging from stars and galaxies to atoms and molecules, as well as self-organizing life forms, in this case, DNA, which we classify as life. For some, the recurring mathematical sequences found throughout nature and within DNA implies some level of intelligence. But according to them, this intelligence cannot be sentient, it had to be programmed, which only leaves the question of who programmed them and who created those programmers and so on, which leaves us right back to the fractal loop of creator and creation. I'd like to propose an idea that is being considered by many, the idea that the nature of reality is not based on technology, but based on a fundamental aspect of the universe that has yet to be recognized: consciousness. A kind of field of intelligence that is intimately associated with the formation of all self-organizing fields, a kind of intelligence that expresses itself through mathematics and harmonics, frequency and vibration, which gives matter its form. Part 6. Order out of chaos. The established paradigm operates on the consensus that the universe is chaos, and through this chaos came the mathematical certainty of all the things that we see, including the formation of life itself. While chaos is certainly an aspect of the universe, it is not in totality. As fractal geometry shows us, order is made out of chaos. The applications and implications of this are apparent as one quickly realizes that this is the nature of our universe. Order out of chaos. This order is governed by the natural laws and forces of the universe. Consciousness, this self-organizing field of intelligence, may be the manifestation of this principle.
Through modern physics, materialism has transcended itself. Materialism is the doctrine that everything is ultimately matter, even consciousness. Matter is no longer the fundamental explanatory principle. People used to think atoms and other particles of matter were solid, enduring stuff. But quantum physics has revealed that they're not. Matter is a process, not a thing. Electrons are waves of activity. They're energy bound within fields, in this case electron fields, which are one kind of quantum matter field. It's fields and energy.
Organizing the chaotic mess of molecules to form the first DNA double helixes and further mold the evolution of all organisms, not just through randomized selection, but also through an intelligence and purpose. This lies in direct confrontation with the established view of an accidental molecular soup, a theory that of which has never been replicated and therefore proven.
In the 1920s, developmental biologists several different developmental biologists proposed that living organisms are shaped by form-shaping fields called morphogenetic fields. Morphogenesis means the coming into being of form, morphe, form, genesis, coming into being. So morphogenetic fields are fields that underlie the coming into being of form.
The more one studies the nature of reality, the more one will find that these material reductionists dismiss valid points, rendering them as mere coincidence. which is again a perspective based on the belief system of the current paradigm that the universe is a culmination of accidents and coincidences. Part 7. The Illusion of Coincidence. As an investigator of reality, I must follow the clues to reveal the truth. And every investigator knows it is folly to believe in coincidences, especially when the coincidences constantly coincide. With a logical mind, look around you. Look what it took to produce what you see. The atoms that make up everything and the subatomic particles that make them up, each as a result of the precise set of circumstances that led them to where they are now. With a logical mind, is it fair to write all this off as a culmination of accidents and coincidence? Considering that we are discovering more and more about the universe, I would say it is wise to incorporate all fields of science and philosophy when investigating the nature of reality.
It's not just the shape, the materials that determine the shape. Something else determines the shape. The shape of a building, as we all know, is determined by the architectural plan. Now that plan, although it can be written on a bit of paper, is not in itself part of the material constituents of the building. If you demolish a building, the total amount of matter remains the same if you collect all the dust, but the plan disappears. If you grind up an animal or plant, as biochemists and molecular biologists do on a regular basis, you destroy the structure and form, and you're left with the kind of rubble, as it were, the molecules, which is what they study and work on. But however much you analyze these molecules, you'll never reveal the form of the organism. That's destroyed in the process of isolating the molecules. So what is it that gives an arm and a leg a different shape? What is it that gives organisms their form? Well, there's something a bit like an architect's plan underlying them, and that is what the morphogenetic field is. It's like an invisible mold, shaping, influence, or form underlying the structure of the organism.
The fractal nature of reality is a sign that this intelligence matrix, this consciousness that exists in all planes of dimensions, takes the shape and form of all matter. The configuration of matter is dependent upon frequency and vibration, the frequencies that shape reality. I, for one, support the notion that this universe is a living one, this model that suggests that the universe has been undergoing an evolutionary process, and that this process is directed with a goal, much like how all living organisms are directed with a goal. Part 8. The Living Universe. Let's take a look at these images again. The structure of the universe and the neurological structure of the brain. The implications of this image are profound, in that from the perspective of fractal geometry, the galaxies in this model assume the role of the electrochemical neurotransmitter traveling through the branches of each neuron. I think this theory corrects the inconsistencies we find in our assumption of an equal distribution of matter across space-time. This model suggests that the movements of galaxies as we know it is the result of the macroneural impulse firing galaxies from the center of each macroneuron, explaining why some galaxies are expanding from one center while other galaxies are on a collision course. The dark matter is a representation of the superstructure of the universe in which the galaxies are contained in, and move about accordingly within their own synaptic pathways. The forces that govern the universe pertain to the macroorganism existing within the greater universe, so on and so forth, implying that the superstructure of both the macroverse and the microverse are both a part of this living universe. From this perspective, the point where non-living matter becomes life is non-existent, as all matter is the result of a living field of intelligence, giving validity to the theory of morphic resonance, which suggests that the universe is a kind of field of intelligence that self-organizes itself into all manifestations of reality. Is that not what it's doing? Even from the current mechanistic view of the universe, is it not self-organizing into all configurations of subatomic structures, giving rise to all that is? Just consider it. And consider the implications and applications. Part 9. Implications and applications. Consider the cultural effects that these realizations would have on societies as we know it. Not only are we related genetically, but we are related atomically. The forces that bind our atoms together are intimately associated with who we are as a consciousness observer. This is fundamentally the basis of all New Age and ancient belief systems, that we are all one consciousness
experiencing itself subjectively. There is no such thing as death. Life is only a dream, and we are the imagination of ourselves.
Here's what we can do to change the world right now to a better ride. Take all that money we spend on weapons and defense each year and instead spend it feeding, clothing, and educating the poor of the world, which it would many times over, not one human being excluded, and we can explore space together, both inner and outer, forever.